So today we're going to talk about what I'm titling Liberation is Disorienting. I started writing this and had to make some shifts because of the news cycle today. Before we begin, I want to offer a blessing. May we have the courage to leave what is familiar when it has become violent. May we have the patience to sit with uncertainty rather than rush back to control. And may we remember that fear is real, but it is not a compass, and may we become the people that freedom requires. Baruch atah Adonai noten la'av koach. Blessed is the source of strength for the weary. And may we find the courage to see clearly and the strength to keep walking. So, one of the most enduring lessons I think that comes out of the book of Exodus is that liberation is not the same as relief. We often imagine freedom as a moment of something dramatic and decisive. The doors of freedom open, the danger ends, and the problem is solved. But Exodus teaches and life teaches that the moment after liberation is often the most destabilizing moment of all because freedom removes the structures we learned how to survive inside of. So freedom removes the structures that we learned how to survive inside of. And what comes next is not peace, it's disorientation. The book of Exodus is a story about what happens after the Israelites or after the people leave Mitzrayim, leave Egypt. The people are freed from enslavement, but fear follows them into the desert, into the wilderness. The external oppressor is gone. Pharaoh is gone. Yet anxiety, distrust, panic remain again and again. The Israelites and the people, the other people, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, long for what they knew, even when they knew, even when what they knew was violent and dehumanizing. Exodus shows us something uncomfortable, that liberation doesn't erase fear, it exposes it. When systems collapse, political, social, religious, or personal, it leaves behind uncertainty. And we as humans rush to fulfill it, to fulfill, rush to fill that uncertainty. We fill it with nostalgia, often with control, often with stories about how things used to be better. Exodus completely refuses that illusion, going going back in time, going backwards is not an option. Learning how to live forward is the work. Learning how to live forward is the work. The book of Exodus gives us a distinction between of discomfort is not the same as danger. I'll get to my point in a moment. I also want to acknowledge that the there's real fear right now in the Jewish community, fear of rising anti-Semitism, fear of violence, fear that history is repeating itself. There is fear about erosion of democratic norms, not just from the Jewish community, but from others, about authoritarian power. There is fear watching immigration enforcement move through cities in ways that tear families apart, that treat human beings as problems to be managed. And Black and brown communities are saying, we have been here before. I am saying we have been here before. W. Du Bois wrote in Black Reconstruction how, after emancipation, the brief glimpse of Black political power and possibilities was met with such violence, such terror, and the nation retreated into myths about the Old South. Oh, thank you for the hearts. Freedom was too destabilizing. Control was more comfortable, and the wilderness was too disorienting. So the wilderness was too disorienting, so they, white folks in America, rebuilt Mitzrayim. They rebuilt Egypt, and they called it Jim Crow. This morning, the President of the United States shared a video depicting Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, first Black president, the first Black lady, or president and former First Lady, former president, former First Lady, as apes, as gorillas. The White House initially defended it as an internet meme, dismissed the backlash as a fake outrage, and then hours later blamed a staffer and they removed it. This, uh, the president has met with backlash across the political spectrum, including Senator Scott, who called it the most racist thing he'd seen come out of the White House. If you didn't know that Trump is racist or using racist tropes, however you want to define it, the man built his presidency on racist tropes by claiming that Barack Obama was not a citizen. So if this upsets you, I'm not sure why you weren't upset before, but seems to have caused many people to be upset, probably because even people who don't understand racism have their lines, and this line is a line in the sand because depicting Black people as racist is an old racist trope. So, my opinion, the imagery of the Obamas as apes and apes, it's preparation. Depicting Black people as apes is how our society prepares itself to commit violence. It's how lynching was justified. It's how medical experimentation on Black bodies was rationalized. It's how police brutality is excused. When you dehumanize someone, you give yourself permission to harm them. You give society permission to harm them. That's the function of this imagery, not to insult, but to ready people for what comes next. That's what state-sanctioned dehumanization looks like. There's surveillance. Well, hold on a sec. That's what state-sanctioned dehumanization looks like. So for many people, the dehumanization of immigrants and migrants in our country and the othering of Black and brown folks was not enough, but depicting a former president as an ape is, I guess, was a line too far for many in our society today. Um, the state-sanctioned dehumanization. So that's what state-sanctioned dehumanization looks like. There's surveillance, the enforcement, the state deciding which bodies are threatening and which lives are expendable. None of this is new. None of it is new. What is new is that white people are now seeing it. Or, many white people are seeing it. What's new is the recognition that whiteness. So what's new for white people? So either white people are saying it, or what's new for them is that they're recognizing that whiteness doesn't protect you the way it once did, or the way we were taught to believe it would. The two people killed are the two people that have gotten the most attention from ICE enforcement have been two white people. It wasn't enough for when a Black man was killed by an ICE agent. It wasn't enough when a queer white woman was killed by an ICE agent. It might be enough for a cisgendered white straight male who was killed by ICE to bring attention to this nightmare. So the fear in our society is real. And sadly for some, this is a bit late because Black and brown people have been telling you all for a long time. This is the reality of what it means to be a Black or brown person in America. None of this fear is imagined, but Exodus, back to the book of Exodus, is asking a harder question. What do we do with the fear once it exists? In the wilderness, the Israelites repeatedly The Israelites repeatedly confuse uncertainty with threat. They experience the loss of familiar systems, even brutal ones, and interpret that loss as danger. They long for an Egypt because it was familiar, not because it was so great, but because it was familiar. That's the trap. Fear tells us safety comes from shrinking, from circling inward, from trading values for control. And there are many in the Jewish community right now that only want us to focus on ourselves as Jews, want us to retreat inward. And fear tells us that safety comes from shrinking, from circling inward, and from trading values for control. Exodus offers a different teaching. Fear is understandable, but it is not a moral compass. The Torah never says fear is irrational. It says fear is not allowed to decide who we become. And one of the most radical claims of Exodus is that freedom comes with responsibility. The people are not given certainty. They are given enough food for the day, enough instruction to keep walking, enough structure to begin building a society rooted in dignity rather than domination. Excuse me. I almost said denomination. Enough structure to begin building a society rooted in dignity rather than domination. Freedom in Exodus is about learning how to care for one another without coercion, how to build norms without brutality, how to live without a master. That kind of freedom is demanding. It requires maturity, preparation, and moral courage. And that's where fear tries to pull us backward towards systems that promise order, even if that order comes at the expense of human dignity. Exodus insists that even in times of fear, we are still accountable for how we treat the vulnerable. We are still called to choose justice over panic and values over expedience and awe over fear. So I'll close with this. Exodus reminds us that liberation is not a straight through line. It's not a straight line. It's a long education. The wilderness is not a failure of the journey. It's the place where people learn who they are willing to be. Remember, we wandered in the desert for 40 years, and that reason was so that we can learn who we are to be. Here's a question I'm holding on right now, and maybe you will too. Where are we mistaking discomfort for danger? Where are we choosing anxiety over justice? And what would it mean to trust that fear does not get the final word? May we be a people who refuse to let fear become our vision. May we have the courage to stay in the wilderness long enough to become the people freedom actually requires. And I'll say one more thing. Stay in this fight, stay strong. This is winnable. We are winning, actually. And don't retreat inward. Build coalitions, work with your neighbors. Do what you can. Doesn't have to be grand, but do what you can to push against our system, and not so that we can return back to the government the way it was before, but so that we can finally build a better democracy, a government, a democracy that works for the betterment of all the people, not just some. Let's work towards that, because we can't go back. We can't go back. We need to work toward a better democracy in the United States. Shabbat is approaching. We're in the Shabbat. We're in the Parshat Yitro. Yitro today is the Torah portion. I know I said I would end, but I got something else I want to say. Yitro is a Torah portion where, the way I'm looking at it right now, where an outsider, a non-Israelite, we maybe say a non-Jew, tells Moses um, that no society should have an authoritarian leader. No society should be run by one man. Think about that. Shabbat shalom, my friends. Y'all have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Watch the replay. I'll catch you later.